What's up, guys? I'm Devin Jackson, joined by Nick Price on the Blue Chip Scouting mock draft series. And today we got the Baltimore Ravens to up on deck. Obviously, we gone through several other teams, but now we're starting to get to the back half of the draft process, and the Baltimore Ravens have pick number 14, correct?
Yes, sir. And I am.
And Nick, you are the resident Baltimore Ravens fan, and obviously we know this team wants to surround Lamar Jackson with more weapons, want to bolster up the offensive line. But what are some of the needs you see for the Ravens going forward?
Well, it may shock you the answer. Jeff Sarebic went on the NFL Stock Exchange podcast about a week. Actually, it was a week ago today, and said that he expects most of the Ravens to spend a good portion of their draft picks on defense. And I tend to agree with that. Obviously, the Ravens are looking to surround Lamar Jackson with a better offensive line. Currently, their starting center is either going to be Patrick McCary or Tristan Colon Castillo. Um, Both have played solid, but I think you'd want someone who is a bit more trustworthy in that position. I mean, granted, McCary's fine. He plays all over the offensive line. He's a really good, versatile guy. But aside from him, they're also looking to potentially upgrade left guard. Granted, they drafted Ben Powers last year in the third round, but he had an up and down rookie season. He didn't play very much. And then there's also the idea of draft another offensive tackle to potentially fill in for Ronnie Stanley if he's not healthy. Um, I know there's a part of the Ravens fan base who is kind of thinking they should go with another receiver because we let Sammy Watkins go in free agency. Miles Boykin hasn't exactly panned out, and they don't know how to feel about Tylan Wallace quite yet. So there's that to consider, but I think a large portion of their picks are going to be focused on defense, namely the defensive line, adding more guys to stuff the run. Brandon Williams is gone, but they brought back Michael Pierce, but he's been injured and is could be over 30. So, and obviously Calais Campbell's aging, and then there's a gigantic hole next or across from Adafe Owe, which needs to be filled, and then of course Ravens during most, if not in their entire cornerback room, was injured last season. So they're potentially going to look at corner probably early on, if not to play slot, nickel, or just another outside corner.
Yeah, we've seen plenty of players be mocked to the Baltimore Ravens. One notably, Jordan Davis. You talked about filling a hole in the middle. Do you see him as a potential pick? Obviously, and I know Ravens fans would love to have him. A lot of teams would love to have Jordan Davis in the middle. Or do you see them possibly targeting an edge? Maybe say if a Jermaine Johnson or somebody like that were to fall outside the top 10.
I think it ultimately depends on who's there. Obviously, there's an argument to be made that a team that went 8-9 last year really shouldn't spend their first pick on a defensive tackle. But as you and I both know, Jordan Davis is a unicorn. He tested out of his gourd. He's great against the run. Doesn't really he. You could argue he wasn't used to his fullest potential at Georgia, which probably reflects some of his pass rush grades. But aside from that, you know, I think if he's there, Baltimore could be tempted. But also, Jermaine Johnson is a special talent in his own right. He put up an incredible performance at the Senior Bowl. He had amazing tape at Florida State. I think if he falls there, they can't turn him up. They would almost look stupid if they don't draft him. But if both of them are there, then I think there's a conversation to be made. It's like what do you prioritize? Edge pass rush or stopping the run? Because you and I both know that the AFC North is full of a lot of teams that like to run the ball, namely Cleveland with Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. Then you have Najee in Pittsburgh, and there's even Joe Mixon in Cincinnati. So I think there's the Ravens organization might have that little bit of a discussion amongst themselves if both of them fall. But personally, I think they would go with Jermaine Johnson if he was there.
Makes sense. Makes sense. But without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We can go ahead and get into the 7 round mock draft and see what we come up with. So, going to share my screen here. If I can.
Also, I don't know if you could hear that helicopter that just flew over my house.
I cannot. No, I
Okay,
didn't hear.
cool.
So I think we're good there.
Gotta worry me for a second.
All right. Let me know if you can see that.
I can see it.
All right, cool. So 7 round mock draft here using the Rise and Draft mock simulator for this draft. This 7 round mock draft for the Ravens, and we're gonna go ahead and get it started. First couple picks, no brainers. I don't really see. There's a few picks there. We can look back at it and see what we have here,
Oh,
but
and both Jermaine and Jordan Davis go.
back
Dang.
to back actually at 12 and 13, and we actually talked about the possibilities of them, either one of them falling. So, but here's a look at the draft overall. I think the only surprise pick there in the top 10 was Kyle Hamilton going to the Carolina Panthers, and then Malik Willis to Washington at 11. All right, on the clock here at 14. And I know we talked about it before the show, possibly maybe a trade back scenario. So is this a trade back scenario for you, or do you want to see who's on the board here?
As always, I want to see who's on the board, but I wouldn't shock me if Baltimore trades out because they've had a habit of doing that in the last few years. I know they obviously famously they traded back, 10 or so picks when they drafted Hayden Hurst, and they used that capital to go up and get Lamar Jackson. Um, but as it stands right now, there's a couple guys I know that they've met. When I think it was a top 30 visit with Trevor Penning, who, granted, I don't know if he played tackle for the Ravens. Maybe you groom him inside a guard and then let him kick out at right tackle once Morgan Moses' contract lets up. But there's always that if he needs to play a tackle right away because of Ronnie Stanley, then there's that to think about. Carl Loftus is interesting. I'm not so sure if I'm sold on drafting him at 14, even though I'm fairly high on Carl Loftus overall. I think he can do a lot for Baltimore. He can play stand up edge for them. Probably put his hand as or play a little 5 technique. I guess he's a really effective run defender. He's just not as flashy as some of his other counterparts in his class. And then there's Trent McDuffie. I know there's been some questions about whether Trent plays inside or outside corner. I think if he became a Raven, hypothetically, they would maybe try to see if he can play a little bit of that slot nickel role and take over for Tavon Young. And if they want a purely outside corner, because I know they kind of just they like putting Marlon Humphrey in its slot nickel, they could also look at Andrew Booth Jr. as well. I didn't quite touch on this before, but if both Davis and Jermaine Johnson are going, I'm personally picking a defensive back, either McDuffie or Booth. And for me, I think I like Andrew Booth a little bit more than Trent McDuffie. Booth is somebody I liked all the way back to last year. I thought he had incredible foot quickness, good vision. He had quality ball production, in my opinion, at Clemson. So I think he's kind of what the Ravens look for. I mean, I love McDuffie too. I think he'd be a great fit for Baltimore. But ultimately, I think Booth is someone they might target a little more because Booth is a little bit bigger and they kind of like bigger corners. So I think Andrew Booth's going to be my pick here at 14.
Yeah, it makes sense. I know the Ravens have changed defensive coordinators this year, but a lot of what they did was leave their corners on an island, and Andrew Booth certainly has the talent to do that. So I think picking him at 14, I don't know how the NFL feels about Booth. I think they're kind of all over the board, in terms of how they view him. I think maybe us in the media is a little bit higher on him
Right.
probably than some NFL teams, which I think it makes sense. I mean, as good as he is, there's still a bit of a learning curve with him, quote
Right.
unquote. But I think it makes sense here to draft Andrew Booth Jr.
I will say this much though. I wouldn't put Baltimore past drafting maybe Devin Lloyd or Tyler Linderbaum. I know Linderbaum's got that whole size thing going because he's a smaller center, and he's not quite a scheme for Baltimore. But I mean, Eric DeCosta has spoken highly of him, and then with Devin Lloyd, they're kind of looking for someone to pair next to Patrick Queen, and we know you and I both know how cerebral Devin Lloyd is. So I think that's something else to consider. But anyway, pick 45.
Yeah, and you talked about there's a few guys here at the top of the board. Then you mentioned, defensive line is a big need. You see Logan Hall on the board, Marvin Leal. Both guys I think can probably play a little bit of 3 and 5 technique at the NFL level. with their versatility and some initial quickness they have. I think Logan Hall's a little bit stronger in the trenches and a little bit more consistent in his game on a down basis. But Liao has had some, some real nice flashes throughout his years at Texas A&M. Linebacker potentially got Quay Walker, who's recently been getting some first round buzz as of late. Really ramping up here in the last few weeks, and then obviously some safeties on the board: Petrie, Brisker, and then looking down the list, they have some receivers here on the board as well. Edge and Drake Jackson too. Is there a name you see here, or a position specifically you want to target here at 45?
I think if Devin, you know me well enough. I think you know where I'm probably going to go with this pick. Before Calais Campbell was re-signed, I've been pounding the table for the Ravens to take Logan Hall at the second round, providing he's there. Like I said before, Campbell is signed for a 2-year deal. He plans on playing, the last of his days as an NFL defensive end in Baltimore. I don't think he plays the full 2 years. I think he possibly plays this year, and then they either cut him for cap reasons or he just up and retires. So you kind of need to start looking towards the future at the 5 technique. They don't really have anybody trustworthy to play 5 tech outside of Campbell. Maybe you think Derek Wolfe can still step in, but he's been injured throughout his tenure in Baltimore. Quay Walker's interesting. I like Quay Walker quite a bit myself. I know there's some people that like Christian Harris, but he has his own limitations. Liao is interesting because of his potential versatility. I think Baltimore can really get creative with him. But ultimately, I think Logan Hall is the perfect pick here. I mean, I've been on Hall since the middle of last summer. I think he's a great defensive piece. I think he is an edge, but if you need to kick him inside 3 technique and sub packages, I think he's a player you can get really creative with. I think he's a perfect fit for Baltimore.
I knew as soon as I saw him on the board that he was probably going to go off the board for you, and it makes sense. I think he fills a need, and even outside how much you appreciate what his skill is, I think it's important to have versatile guys along the defensive line. We see teams kind of get creative with their scheme and get creative with how they do things. So it's very interesting there, and I figured that would be a pick. All right, we're back on the clock at 76. I was actually going to mention this name right before he got selected, but Troy Anderson was starting to slide down the board a little bit as a potential pick. Saw Tariq Woolen go off the board. I know he's a high ceiling corner who still has a bit to go. Jamari Salyer would have been a nice utility guy as well for the Ravens, I would think, along the offensive line, but he's off the board too. So here's a look who's on the board. He talked about probably going defensive heavy, and that's exactly what we've done so far through the first couple selections. But maybe add some offensive talent here, deep receiver class. You see Calvin Austin, Alec Pierce, both guys that you watch. Funny enough, we're getting a lot of your guys here at the top here. And then further down the board, you got Cole Strange, Abraham Lucas as potential offensive line fits, and then Channing Tindall and a few other names down here. Edge-wise, you got Sam Williams down here too. Brandon Smith may be an intriguing backer who could maybe switch to that outside backer and join his former teammate Adafe Owe as well. So any of these names here sparking interest for you and for the Ravens?
Obviously, you mentioned the offensive weapons like Austin, I'm very pleased to say that he is getting a lot of attention in the draft community. It makes me feel, just warms my heart. Same thing with Alec Pierce. I'm intrigued by Chad Muma because I thought Chad Muma had some really, really, really nice Senior Bowl tape. Couple plays where he just darted from like the middle of the field as a Mike linebacker and went straight to the sideline, made a beautiful tackle. Also, Myjai Sanders is on the board. Granted, the hang up with him. And I think that might be being a deal breaker for Baltimore is that he's not exactly the strongest against the run. say what you will about Mcduffie in college, I thought he was a pretty good run defender, despite his rawness as a player. And Dalen Hayes, who they took last year, I thought was also pretty decent against the run. Sanders, he struggles with keeping on weight. I didn't think he managed to set a physical edge. So there's a couple. I was almost tempted to draft Drake Jackson before, but there's a couple guys I think coming later up that I have my eye on. As far as edge rushers go, I know Rasheed Walker has a lot of fans in the Ravens fan base. It makes sense. He's from Waldorf, Maryland, so naturally that's like the big sticking point for Ravens fans. Not that it's really makes much sense. Brandon Smith, I'm intrigued by as well. Dang, I'm actually really stumped at this pick. I'm not going to lie. Let me see interior offensive line though.
Go up the board a little bit here. All right, you got Cam Jurgens, Ed Ingram, Cole Strange, Luke Fortner, who I got into his tape last night, and dude is really good. I think he should be ranked a little higher than 121, just in my opinion. But I know this is just a more of a comprehensive or what people think. Zach Tom too is someone that intrigues me. I think could go sometime in the third round or early fourth round. So I'm a little surprised by his ranking too. But he has tackle center versatility, which is very rare at the college level. So yeah, I mean, I think a lot of these guys here on the board will be interesting. But for me personally, I like Zach Tom a ton. I think he would make a lot of sense for the Ravens.
See, I haven't gotten a chance to watch Zach Tom. He's one of those guys where if he gets drafted by Baltimore, I'll probably go back and watch him. But I just that my schedule way is I haven't had a chance to watch him. The same thing with Cole Strange. So he kind of is that kind of similar player with Bakari, where he can play center, but he can play tackle. So that's kind of interesting. Devin, I'm going to trust you on this one. Let's take Zach Tom. I'm curious. I don't know. I mean, Ravens fans might kill me for this because they have no clue who the hell this guy is. But the Baltimore also took Brandon Stevens last year. I had no idea who that guy was. So there's really no telling with these guys.
For sure. Back on the clock at 100. So I didn't realize they were going to be picking back to back so soon. So maybe I may have reached a little bit, but I think you're still getting a really good player. All right, we'll see who's on the board here. Now you say you want to wait a little bit more for edge rusher, but here's who's on the board. Your guy Darian Beavers as a linebacker on the board here. Nick Cross, who has really emerged over the last month or two as someone people are starting to come around on. And got Max Mitchell as well, who can play tackle, maybe moves to guard at the NFL level. And some potential running backs here down the board too, in Algier and Kyra Williams. And then obviously Titans here at the top with Dolchich, Rucker, and likely all still on the board. Damone Clark too, and these guys striking interest for you at pick 100.
I'm going to say this much: Baltimore is apparently in the market for another running back. I know you were the one who told me that they're interested in Tyler Beatty in the third round, which I think's weird, to say the least. Granted, with both J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards coming off humongous injuries, there's kind of that uncertainty of whether they will be ready or not. But I'm not going to take Isaiah Spiller though. As much as I love Isaiah, I don't think I could do it. Tight end's interesting. Granted, Mark Andrews, one of the better tight ends in football. They don't really have anyone behind him. I mean, Nick Boyle has been injured. Josh Oliver has been, solid when he's had opportunities thrown his way. But I still want to look at edge rusher right quick because you know how I am. Like my
you watch a lot of edge rushers, so I'm not surprised we're going here.
And I waited a little bit. Granted, I Rise and Draft is this mock draft simulator is a little bit lower on him than I am, and I know a couple other people are, like Corey Kinnan. But Alex Wright is probably one of my favorite prospects in the draft. Baltimore has met with him. They did a interview with him, I think after the combine, which is fun. He is a really big stand-up edge. He's kind of in the same idea with Logan Hall, where you can play him at 5 technique. You can put him at 7, 9. He can also drop into kind of that stand up, like hovering over the A gap, B gap on sub packages and just rush in the middle. Because there was a play, I think it was a play against FAU, where he hit the guard with probably the nastiest inside cross chops I've ever seen and completely leveled their quarterback. Um, and I think he's someone who has a lot of potential as an edge rusher. I know they kind of put all their eggs in the basket last year for Adafe Owe in hopes that he's becoming something. And I think they could do the same thing again with Alex Wright. So I'm going to pick Alex Wright right here, the brand guy for me.
Yeah, Alex Wright. Hopefully, I get to him before the process ends. Because I know you and Corey can have talked him up quite a bit, and I've seen him in passing. Watching the Georgia UAB game. Obviously, he kind of caught my eye. Same thing against him against Liberty as well. So very interested to see how he fares and where he ends up going, because in this process he hasn't been able to really test. He hasn't really been able to show off kind of his agilities and testing wise. So I think that may hurt him a little bit in this process, but we'll see what happens. All right, we're back on the clock at 110 early in round 4. Kind of a recap of what we've done so far. Got Booth, Logan Hall, Zach Tom, and Alex Wright. We talked about at the top of the show that we're going to go defensive heavy. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 picks here in round 4. So it's going to be a busy round 4 before we finish out in round 6. All right. Obviously day 3 is a time that you do dart throws. You do you pick players who you think can make the roster or become contributors down the line. And pretty much all the tight ends are still on the board here. I know you mentioned maybe you need a backup tight end here, adding to the secondary as well. A huge need to. Where do you want to go here with one of 5 picks here in round 4?
My mind's already made up. Greg Dulcich. If I'm looking at my board correctly, he is probably the highest rated player here I have. He deserves to be a tight end one somewhere else, but I think the ultimate goal for Baltimore in this offense is getting them back to their 2019 success when Lamar Jackson was the MVP. And during that year, they had more than one viable option at tight end. Obviously, Hayden Hurst, for wherever kind of label you want to put at him as far as his career's gone, he was very, very, very reliable that year, along with Mark Andrews. I think having someone like Dulcich, who is a great receiver, matching him with Mark Andrews, I think it's wonderful. I mean, Baltimore's not opposed to doing stuff like this. There's a time when they trotted out Dennis Pitta and Ed Dixon as a tight end duo, and they were both fantastic. So I think that's a smart play here.
Yeah, and it makes sense. There is quite a buzz around Dulcich, and some people have him as tight one on their boards. Some teams do as well that we've heard through the media, but inevitably that pick set off a kind of a tight end run, because we had Dulcich come off the board for us, and then the Broncos take Isaiah Likely and Jeremy Rucker back to back picks. So they're clearly not fans of Albert O in that particular mock, but. Anyway, back here on the clock at 119, second of 5 fourth round picks here for the Baltimore Ravens. Where are you going here? You see some interesting names here on the board. Got earlier, I think up there, you see Alontae Taylor. You got Josh Jobe, Zion McCollum at DB. JoJo Doman at linebacker is kind of a dime linebacker. Terrell Bernard, one of my Carnitions guys that he's been pumping up since the summer. Again, you can add more to the edge rushing group. Dominique Robinson, a player that I like as a developmental edge, and quite a few other names here in round 4. Any of these names strike anything for you, or is there a particular position you want to go after here? Because we have a plethora of picks here, so if you want to go for a particular player, go for it.
Have you watched Caleb Evans at all this year?
I have seen bits and pieces of him. I think I saw him against Central Michigan and maybe against Boston College. I think those are the 2 games that I watched, and was paying attention to other players. But I thought he was solid in Missouri. I don't think he had quite the season he did at Tulsa, and I do think he's probably a zone corner at the
Okay.
NFL level because I just don't think he's going to have enough foot speed to be a true man corner. But I do think he can fit in a zone scheme.
I think here, I think Max Mitchell's gonna be my pick. I like Mitchell's potential quite a bit. Granted, I know we already took a tackle in Zach Tom, but judging how the offseason's gone, it's clear the NFL is trying to put Zach Tom at center.
Yep.
So I think you get a developmental right tackle to potentially take over from Morgan Moses when his contract's up, or if they Baltimore cuts him at some point. I don't think they will, but at 128. Let me see interior defensive line. I'm curious. Okay. I don't know if this is a little bit early for him, but I am a big fan of John Ridgeway, the defensive tackle from Arkansas. I think as far as pure nose tackles go, he's really good. He understands leverage really well. He's got good lower half strength. You don't have to worry about him rushing the passer too much, which is fine. Baltimore really does with the nose tackles. I think this is more of a depth piece than anything else. Justin Ellis is no longer there. Like I said, Brandon Williams is probably not coming back. They only have Michael Pierce as a nose tackle. And I don't know. And behind Michael Pierce is Khalil McKenzie and Isaiah Mack. I think John Ridgeway has much more upside than either one of those, and could potentially grow into a starting role down the line. I think we'll pick John Ridgeway here.
Yeah, and you pick Ridgeway, but name, I think the draft community should continue to talk about more is Thomas Booker from Stanford. Didn't have quite the season he did last year, this past season, but he had a really good East-West Shrine game, or Shrine Week, I should say, and I think he's going to, or he has already, interviewed very well. And I think he's going to go a little earlier than we think. Probably, I wouldn't be surprised if we count the board sometime early day 3, like early round 4. Once the defensive line group starts to thin out. Same thing with Uwazurike from Iowa State. I think, Mike's a big fan of his. And he certainly blew up at the combine. And while he's ranked 202 right here on Rising Draft Simulator, I do think he probably goes a little bit higher than consensus. But anyway, back to the Ravens pick. We got back-to-back picks here at 139 and 141. You talk about running back being a possible need with some injuries going on. So here's a look at who was available. Got Pierre Strong Jr., Jerome Ford, Kyra Williams, who people have kind of soured on a little bit. Tyler Beatty, who I told you, the Ravens were potentially interested in being more probably that third down back role. I do think his vision has a little bit of ways to go to be a true 3-down back, but he kind of fits that prototype of a Danny Woodhead type, or kind of Darren Sproles type as well, where you can get him out in against linebackers and he can exploit it. Hassan Haskins, who people have been kind of all over the board with, I do think he has some intrigue day 3, and then Devontae Price, I know is somebody you watch as well.
Yeah. I'm really tempted to go Kyron because he's the highest running back I have graded right here. Tyler Beatty is also really intriguing because I'm a big Tyler Beatty fan as well. God, I hate that I have to choose.
But of course, we don't have to take running back now. I figured, since you talked about it, we can take a look at it. But here's a look at the full board here. If you want to continue to add to the edge class or linebacker or somebody else here, you see Luke Gadecki, someone to an offensive line that can play guard or tackle. But you have options here. Potential nickel here and Tariq Castro Fields. Same thing with Amari Mathis from Pitt. So you got some options here.
Back to the Ridgeway pick, I was almost tempted to take Booker, but I view Booker as more of a 3 technique than a pure nose, and Ravens are very happy with Justin Madubuike. So, unfortunately, I think I'm gonna pick Kyron. I like Kyron Williams quite a bit. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a moment.
I mean, I think it speaks. You don't have to say a whole bunch. Kyron Williams. I know people are gonna point the
Yeah.
testing, but he's a really good pass protector, very smooth running back. He's not going to wow you, I think, in the open field or with his natural speed, but you need more of a rotational guy and someone that can take the pressure off of Dobbins and who's coming off injury, and same thing with Gus Edwards, who has been mostly a rotational back anyway throughout his career, but with how much the Ravens like to run the ball, I think Kyra Williams will fit right in.
And I think for this pick, um, I'm like you. I'm a big fan of Dominique Robinson. I think as a purely developmental guy, I think he's someone that is probably one of the better fits for Baltimore. Just having played stand up edge, use him as in sub packages, and use him as designated pass rusher, and just scheme up pressure for him. I think he's going to a great situation. I think he'd be going to a great situation in Baltimore. They certainly have the coaching staff and the defensive coordinator to get the most out of him. So I think we'll go with Don Robinson here.
Yeah, and he kind of fits that. You got Odafe Owe, who can also drop in coverage. I think with Robinson's background, although he was mostly play hand in the dirt at Miami, Ohio, he has a receiver and tight end background. So he has hips. He's pretty fluid in and out of his breaks, and he's someone I think, or was fluid in and out of his breaks as a receiver and tight end. So I do think he's someone that can be interesting at the very least for this team. All right, final pick here in this mock draft. Tyler Beatty actually just went off the board at 192 for the Ravens. But you did mention corner is still being in need. You got Andrew Booth in the first round, but maybe you can add to that Joshua Williams from Fayetteville State. Watched him, big fan of his. Probably a developmental guy though, but I think he can play on special teams immediately, and someone you can possibly mold down the line. And looking at some other ones, Cordell Flott, who has not gotten a lot of buzz in the draft process. I do think there's some some intrigue with him as well. You got Chase Lucas as well as Jermaine Waller. Lucas, a name that's been hanging around the draft community for a couple years now, and finally went into the draft. And Jermaine Waller, I know someone that you liked, watching early on in the season as well, just to look at the DB class. But here's who else is on the board: Grant Calcaterra. I know you like his game and what he brings to the table too. But the concussion is obviously a big sticking point for him to kind of stick around the league too. But yeah, let me know what you see here. Spencer Burford a little bit further down here too. I know one of your guys is why I feel like every time we see some of these names, you've watched them or talked about them on Twitter.
Let me see a receiver right quick. It's probably a little bit too late to get anybody truly effective, but I'm just curious. Okay, Reggie, Kelvin Austin.
Yeah, as we look at the names, not overly, explosive, but there are some names, some camp bodies potentially. Charleston Rambo had a really good East-West Shrine Week, in Vegas. But yeah, here's a look at kind of the rest of the names here.
Something tells me Baltimore is probably going to draft more than one corner. Granted, I haven't watched Joshua Williams, but I've heard nothing but good things about him. And Baltimore's not afraid of just throwing picks at developmental people either. So let's put Joshua Williams. It's interesting.
Yeah, so with Williams, he played a lot of like heavy zone scheme. And it was a D2 level. I want to remind people that too that haven't watched him, but he plays almost like a safety. He was baiting quarterbacks to throw passes 40 yards downfield because he has that recovery speed and he knows he can bait quarterbacks. So I think he has the ball skills already. Just the true foot speed. I think he ran like a 4.57 or something like that, the 40-yard dash in Indianapolis because he got invited to the combine, which I thought was solid, and he did pretty well in agility. So he's clearly going to get drafted, but I think people are kind of split on where. Some people got him going the third or fourth round. Some got him going fifth, sixth round. I think probably he's probably going to go somewhere between the fourth and fifth rounds, just based on his experience and whatnot. But I see a couple of my guys here at the end of the draft going off the board in Jacoby Durant,
Mhm.
as well as Deshaun Dixon, two guys I really like from the HBCU. So very, very impressive there. All right. So here is a look back at who we all drafted with the Ravens expansive draft group that had um, five fourth round picks. But here's a look: Andrew Booth Jr., Logan Hall from Houston, Zach Tom from Wake Forest, Alex Wright from UAB, Greg Dulcich from UCLA, Max Mitchell from Louisiana Lafayette, John Ridgway from Arkansas, Kyron Williams from Notre Dame, Dominique Robinson from Miami, Ohio, and Joshua Williams from Fayetteville State. I'm very thankful that we did not draft any names that I don't know how to pronounce, because that was a fairly easy there. Mike always makes fun of me for it.
Yeah, yeah. This is all easily very simple, like basic, just dude names. I don't know, Logan, Zach. I know plenty of those people.
Greg,
Oh,
Max, you
yeah.
know. But you look back at this draft, and you know, we finished it here. But what would you give this a grade to this class if it were to come true on draft day, or on
So
draft weekend, I should say, because it's more than just round one.
the fanboy in me, and then being the person who picked every single most of these, except for two, I would give it an A plus. But I think this is more like a B plus A range. I think you got a lot of guys with potential, namely Zach Tom, Alex Wright, Mitchell, Dom Robinson, and of course Joshua Williams. But you also have a lot of immediate contributors. Andrew Booth, Logan Hall, Greg Dulcich, definitely. Ridgeway, who I think could see snaps at an interior, relatively speaking, especially if Michael Pierce doesn't play as healthy as I would hope he does during the season. So I would say it's a boomer bust draft, but there's definitely guys who you're betting on that upside and want to hit a certain benchmark at a certain point. Probably one of the bigger gambles is getting Zach Tom in round 3. If he can develop into a true starting center, that's fantastic. But he also gives it outside tackle versatility. So I mean, overall, I'd be pretty happy with this. I know it would probably take some convincing because Ravens fans might not know who Zach Tom is. A lot of that's definitely he's definitely like a niche guy right now. Um, I'm sure they would be ecstatic over the Dulcich pick as as far as value goes. And the same thing with Kyron. Um, but I think I'd be happy with this. If granted, was kind of disappointed that Jermaine Johnson wasn't there at 14 because he's the guy I really want for Baltimore. But Andrew Booth, great player. He'll be a fantastic Raven. I have no qualms about him being a steady contributor for many years.
Yeah, I think what the important thing about this draft is that you got a mix of potential starters from day one, and a mix of guys that you can develop down the line, because
Mhm.
I think that's important, that a lot of people kind of lose in the draft process, is that it's not just one in year one. It takes several years down the line. And for Zach Tom specifically, I don't think this is a comp, but I can see him carving out a Eric McCoy type of career, where people are not don't know a lot about him, or didn't watch him a ton heading into the draft. And his name is starting to make rounds a little bit over the last couple of weeks. But he has some fantastic film against Jermaine Johnson, mainly one. That's the reason that he caught my eye, because I was watching Jermaine Johnson. I'm like, who is this dude that's just stonewalling him? And did some research. Zach Tom played center his first couple years, played tackle his last couple. I
Mhm.
think he can carve out Eric McCoy type of role, where he's just rock solid. He's
Right.
not going to be. I don't think he's going to be ever the best on in his position, quote unquote. But I do think he can provide stability in consistency for Ravens offensive line that's gone through some change over the last couple years.
Exactly. I now feel compelled to go watch him.
Yeah, I would recommend. I
I
mean,
think I
he's
am.
a fun watch. So,
Uh,
uh, but that'll do it for this mock draft on the Baltimore Ravens. Leave some comments below. Let us know what you think. You can follow me on Twitter at reald_Jackson. You can follow Nick on Twitter at PriceCheck3. Is that correct?
yes, sir.
You can follow Blue Chip Scouting on Twitter at Blue Chip Scout, and make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel as we continue to move through the back half of this mock draft series, going through all 32 teams. But for now, we'll see you guys later.